Hello everybody, I'm Mrs. Poppet and this is my place. Welcome back for another story time today. I have a very good story picked out for you. It's one that many of you like. It's called Sleeping Beauty. Have you heard this story before? Well, let's read it together. Sleeping Beauty. A long time ago there was a king and a queen who desperately wanted to have a child. And every day the king would say in vain, "If only we had a child." Then at long last the queen gave birth to a healthy girl who was so pretty that the king was overjoyed. He ordered a great feast in her honor. He invited his family, friends, and acquaintances, and also the wise women, so they would take a kind interest in his child. There were 13 wise women in the kingdom, but he only had 12 golden plates for them to eat off of, so one of them was not invited. The feast was very grand. When it came to an end, each wise woman bestowed a magical gift upon the baby. One gave virtue, another gave beauty, a third gave riches, and so on until the princess had been promised everything anyone could ever want. When 11 of the 12 wise women had made their promises, suddenly the 13th came in. She was furious and vengeful because she had not been invited to the feast. Without greeting or even looking at anyone, she cried out, "The king's daughter shall, in her 15th year, prick herself on a spindle and fall down dead." Then she turned and stomped out. Everyone was shocked. But the 12th wise woman, whose good wish was still unspoken, came forward. She could not undo the evil promise, but she could soften it. She said, "The princess shall not fall down dead, but shall sleep for 100 years. Then she can be awoken by a king's son." The king tried everything he could to keep his dear child from the promised misfortune. He gave orders that every spindle in the whole kingdom should be burned. Meanwhile, the gifts of the first 11 wise women were fulfilled. The girl became every day more beautiful, modest, good-natured, and wise. It happened that on the very day when she turned 15, the king and the queen were not at home, so the princess was left alone in the castle. She wandered around into all sorts of places, looked into rooms and bedchambers just like she liked to do, and at last came to an old tower. She climbed up the narrow winding staircase and tried a little door at the top. There, in a small room, sat an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning her flax. "Good day. What is that you are doing?" asked the king's daughter, for of course she had never seen a spindle or anyone spinning flax before. "I am spinning," said the old woman, and nodded her head. "What is this thing that rattles so merrily?" asked the girl, reaching for the spindle. She had scarcely touched it when it pricked her finger and the magic spell was fulfilled. She fell down into a deep sleep. The sleep extended over the whole castle. The king and queen, who had just come home, fell asleep where they sat in the great hall. The whole court slept with them. The horses, too, went to sleep in the stables, the dogs in the yard, the pigeons upon the roof, even the flies on the wall. The fire that was flaming on the hearth became quiet and slept, and the cook, who was just going to pull the hair of the scullery boy because he had forgotten something, let him go and went to sleep. A hedge of thorns grew up around the castle until nothing could be seen, not even the flag on the roof. After long years, a king's son came to that country and heard an old man talking about the thorn hedge and the stories of a castle that stood behind it, in which a beautiful princess had been asleep for 100 years. The young prince longed to know whether there was any truth in this tale, and to see the fabled castle and the beautiful princess himself. It happened that one 100 years had now passed since the princess fell asleep, so when the king's son broached the thorn hedge, he found it consisted only of large, lovely flowers, which parted and let him pass unhurt, then closed again behind him. He found the castle. In the yard he saw the horses and hounds lying asleep. On the roof sat the pigeons with their heads under their wings. When he entered, the flies were still asleep on the wall, and the maid was slumbering by a black hen she had been going to pluck. In the great hall he saw the whole court sleeping, and up on the throne lay the king and queen, sound asleep. At last he came to the tower, and opened the door into the little room where the princess was asleep. There she lay, so beautiful that he could not turn his eyes away, and he bent down and he kissed her. The princess awoke and looked up at him sweetly. They went down together, and the king awoke, and the queen, and the whole court, and they looked at each other in great astonishment. The horses in the stable stood up and shook themselves. The hounds jumped up and wagged their tails. The pigeons on the roof lifted their heads from under their wings, looked around, and flew into the sky. The flies on the wall began to creep again. The fire in the kitchen burnt up and flickered. The cook hit the boy around the head, and the maid finished plucking the black hen. The marriage of the king's son and the princess was celebrated with great splendor, and they all lived contentedly to the end of their days. Isn't that a lovely story? I like it so much. Even though the princess slept for a very long time, she met her prince, and they did get to live happily ever after. Isn't that wonderful? Well, I hope you liked it as much as I did, and I will see you here again tomorrow.